Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Journey to Legacy podcast. My name is Wayne Veldsman. Thank you so much for being here today. You're in for a super treat. Dr. Esther Zeledon of BeActChange is our guest. You all, if you relate a little bit to what I personally talk about in the Journey to Legacy brand, you are going to relate a ton to Esther today. Man, where even to start for you all? I have a huge page of notes here from our interview, everything from talking about how to actually make that leap from the classic golden handcuffs of a full-time job into entrepreneurship, into your full purpose, and actually reaching your highest aspirations and turning them into reality, or determining your highest aspirations and then actually turning that into reality. You're in for a huge treat. Dr. Esther Zeledon of BeActChange. I hope you enjoy. Esther, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
My pleasure. Esther, tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, so I like to introduce myself by saying that I'm in the business of impacting lives, and I do that by helping people unpack their mission, vision, and purpose, make it happen, and keep it going. Right, so it applies to individuals, teams, and organizations. But definitely to get to this point, it was a journey.
A journey for sure. I love that. The business of impacting lives. Obviously, lots of stuff impacts people's lives. Give me a little bit more specific there. What do you mean by that?
Yes. I mean, but one is that I like to say that at first because it's my clear alignment, right? I'm not here to just make, 7, 8 figures, right? Like my main purpose and of helping for people is to change and transform and impact them in their life. When their life, and it could be their life, I see work as work life and integration, right? So your life can be your personal life with your business, or your personal life in your NGO, or whatever, passion, legacy you're trying to build. So that is what impact means for me. I help you unpack what you're already doing, create some structure and process around it, right? So my gift is I know how to unpack people's unique how-to. Right. So people have a way to solve problems, and we're all sought out for solving problems, whether by our friends or our family in the workforce. And we've been that way since we were 7, or even before that. Right. But I mean, that's when we're able to articulate it. And we have a unique how-to, and we bring that to every single problem we face. So I help people unpack that unique how-to and then tie that to their legacy and to who they are as a person. And that's like your purpose, right? Your unique how-to you bring every day, right? And then that leads to the legacy you want to build. So purpose doesn't change, but your legacy is always moving, right? But to how much information you have, your legacy can change and how you want to leave it and the feeling you want to leave behind. And purpose is individual, but mission vision is group, right? That's organization, that's teams, that's families, that's communities, that's countries. And that's why I say it's like your purpose and then the mission vision, because if you don't know what value you're bringing into a group, whatever that space is, whatever that team is, and team is defined as like, like I said, all those different elements, right? It could be your family, it could be your country, it could be community, anything that you're a part of, you need to know what you bring to that table. Because when you don't know, and you don't know your unique proposition, your value add, then what happens is that's when you're looking at the other direction. That's when you're trying to compete. That's when you're trying to mimic. That's when you're chasing metrics that might not even be metrics that you want, right? So I think that's why that first step for me is let's unpack that for you. And it's stuff that's already deep inside of you, but you didn't know how to connect the dots, right? I help you connect those dots.
Sure.
And then how do you sustain it, right? That was a roadmap on how you take your purpose, create your legacy, but then how do you keep it going? Because the things that we overcome, we keep overcoming and they keep setting us back. So how do you keep that resilience going, that energetic alignment, so you can keep being that authentic self to the world?
Wow. So much to unpack there, from helping individuals to find their purpose. I like how then you talked about that purpose is for the individual to where mission and vision is for the group, right? Helping people to actually figure out what that is, figuring out their unique how to. I've never heard that before, right? Helping people to unpack that. Where did that come from? Like, how did you decide that's a way to phrase it or to help people figure out their purpose as their unique how to?
Yeah. The thing is, like, so your purpose is like your higher, right? Your higher calling, right? And that's why it's
Sure.
linked. Like I have legacy part of that, but okay, let me go backstory. When I was in high
Please.
school, there has to be a backstory to this, right?
I
Because
love stories. We love them.
why did I get obsessed with this?
Great.
In high school, I was I could go to the library because it was free. I didn't grow up with much resources, right? And so I was very obsessed with the meaning of life and purpose and legacy. And all the books I read talked about finding your purpose, right? And it was very interesting because none of them were written by women, and I saw all these interesting connections with that. But it was all about finding your purpose, but no one told you how to.
Mm.
It was just kind of like go on a discovery to find it, and they had all these. You would read like fiction, like I loved The Alchemist. This is a story and how he found it. I'm very inspired by the Celestine prophecy, right? That's also a story and it unpacks a little bit on how you can find it too, but it's more about the importance and then your connection, right? And how this
Mm.
connects with the whole world that you live in. And I'm super inspired by those books. And then there's all these other books, but none of them really told you how. And then there's the Japanese model, right? The Ikagi, that talks about it in terms of what you should be doing every day, right? So it talks about like what you love, what you could teach the world, and I incorporate a lot. So I incorporate all three of their teachings in it. But I still felt, even when I did that it didn't connect my whole life, right? So I take a very holistic view. Like I found that the Japanese model gave me clarity on, for example, how I should be productive on a day to day.
Sure. More day to day.
Yeah, or like the other two gave me a connection to like a spiritual world and my connection into being of service. But
Nice.
it still didn't tell me what makes Esther Esther, right? And the thing is that it's hard to see in that moment because we're sought out for a lot of different things, right? And so I also have that in my purpose on like what are you currently sought out for? What don't you want to be sought out for? Because just because you're
Mm.
good at it doesn't mean you want to be. And what you would love to be sought out for, right? And I think like that was a part that I realized that it couldn't be the things I was being sought out for then, right? Like I felt it had to be deeper. And so what helped me actually was actually going to I spent some time in Nicaragua during my dissertation work. And I think that's when I really was able to get this clarity on the how to, because I was doing interviews. And actually back then I've always been trailblazing something. Like one, I was like, I created the environmental science major in my college because no one else was doing
Wow.
it. And I wanted at that time, because it was like 20 years ago, well, I created it more like 23 years ago, but I graduated 20 years ago. It was really because I saw complex problems that people were not addressing this problem that's going to affect humanity, right? It wasn't even so much that
Mm.
I wanted to be an environmental scientist. I just felt like I saw that gap and I wanted people to feel that they had permission to fill it, right? But I feel like
Sure.
I needed to help blaze that trail for folks. But in that, especially in graduate school, and I started to go deeper in it, I saw that there was like two people, like scientists, and then people who like to go listen to people on a much more introspective level, and they weren't connecting. So I was like, I'm gonna go try to connect these two together. So I was showing like science on the ground doing that. But that's when I saw the how to, because as I was listening to folks, because most of like development models and things like that is like you go to someone and it's the same as a person as it is to a country. You go in like, I know what you need to do. Think about a parent to a child. You need to do this because I know what's best for you. And it's the same in humanitarian world. Like I studied engineering, so I know exactly what building you need, right? And it's we follow those same patterns without
Mm.
taking that time to listen to people. And I think that's when I realized that all these people had already very much clarity on their mission and vision as a collective, right? And I was like, oh, how is it that you've come into clarity on your mission vision and the value proposition that each person has? And I think through doing all those interviews and that, what became very clear to me is that everyone knew what they brought to the table and how they can be a piece of the solution. And that's when I put it together that, like, wait, I think everyone has a how-to that's different.
Mm.
And that's what makes teams so unique. Even if you have a team of engineers, I noticed I'm like, everyone has a different way of approaching this. And as I started to work more with like in doing that research and working more with teams, I'm like, everyone has a unique how to. So I started testing and I started, refining my questions and seeing to unpack. And I realized that through my questions of unpacking your how to and then ground truthing it, I'm a scientist, right? I'm like, let's go back. Let's see if you tackle all problems like that in your personal and professional life. And then let's go back into your whole childhood and ask people how you impacted them and how, and see if you followed that same pattern. And then they start to tie that your impact is related to your how to, right? And that's what we want to
Wow.
be sought out for. We're people that want to solve problems for people. And that's
Absolutely.
why we love giving advice, right? That's why we
Yeah.
love to be of service. But what's in alignment with us is being of service of the way our how to works, right? We don't want to solve solutions and do things that's not in our natural alignment. And that's when jobs are not a fit. And I've seen so
Mhm.
many people that are in just sometimes just a tweak in the job, right? Even like when I help people with resumes, I help them arrange it on their how to. So it's very clear to the employer. This is how I like to solve things, and this is how I've done it, and this is how amazing it is. And so that way, do you need someone that can solve problems like that? Am I a fit? And also, are they going to value and appreciate what I bring, right? And so I really believe by like us understanding that we stop going to jobs that don't fit. We stop growing businesses that are not aligned with us. We start doing things that flow naturally.
Mm.
And also, when we understand our how to, we're more willing to listen and help other people unpack it. We're more willing to listen to our children's. We're willing to, if you're a humanitarian, you're willing to go places and ask them what that is in
Sure.
partnerships. Yeah.
Is that because you said when you're more understanding of your how to, you're more willing to listen to others the way that they do it? Is that simply because you now understand the fact that your how to is different than others?
Yes, and you start to appreciate that and realize that it's not selfish, right? There's a lot of people who tell me, "Oh,
Mm.
purpose is selfish," or "I'm not special," all those things, right? And I think it's
Sure.
realizing that once you realize that no one's how to is the same, even if some things are similar, your order or how you flows
Sure.
is different. You start creating value for yourself, and then you start realizing you start seeing it around you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting to me that you said from a young age, right? You gave me a lot of information, amazing information here, Esther. So I'm going to try and unpack some of it. From a young age, you said, despite a lack of resources, you went to the library that was free and you started searching out knowledge. I really appreciate that you said that because there's a lot of people in this world that don't have as much resources or they feel like they are at a lack, I guess you could say, and then they're afraid to go out and get something. Just goes to show a library is free. Endless information is free. We're blessed that the internet right now is free, even though if you don't have a device to use it, well, luckily the library has most of the time internet access as well, which is amazing. And so you started looking at books, learning about purpose early on, which is super interesting, all the way to in your dissertation, you were doing all of these interviews, which actually led you to figure out this how to. You said you're very scientific, so you went back and unpacked that it wasn't just their current job, but it was actually everything that they did in life, all the way back to their childhood. You're doing interviews. When somebody can back things up with science like that, it's super impressive. It's really interesting to me. And so let's take a couple steps back to where you were talking about that. From early age, you were started talking about or reading about purpose. Where did that come from? Was that just something innately inside of you? Was it your parents that sort of pushed you that direction? I know you mentioned that you're first generation immigrant, sort of chased the American dream. Tell us a little bit more about that part of your life.
Yeah. So purpose always interested me, but I didn't feel that I deserved to seek it. So I mean, backstory is that I was born in Nicaragua. When I was 2, I was given 3 weeks to live. And how that happened was that I had this like urethra problem, and they couldn't doctors couldn't figure it out in country or in the neighboring countries. And they told my parents the only way is to go to the US to certain specialists. I mean, no guarantee, but then it would be cash. And at that time, like there was a lot of factors, right? Like devaluing of currency in the country. This is during like early 80s, right? And it's the wars, like there's threat of war. So a lot of issues. And my parents were like, there's no way. But my dad, he's not religious, but he is spiritual. And he was
Sure.
like, well, I want to play the lottery. And my mom was
Huh.
like, you're crazy. Like, this is not a priority. And because especially there, it's not like in the US or UK or different, different model where it's inaffordable. There you have to
Sure.
buy like a whole bunch of numbers back then.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it's not that it's expensive, but it's something you think about. And so but my aunt was like, I'll do it with you. Let's split it. So they bought it and they win. And so my
What?
mom goes with me to Miami, yeah, over a couple months, and they saved my life. Now, when we come back,
Wow.
though,
I'm
so
sorry. I was going to pause you there. We'll start there.
yeah,
That's so
it's
crazy to
crazy.
hear, right?
Yeah,
I think earlier we talked about people have a higher purpose in life. Something you really believe in is
yeah,
the more that you give, the more you receive. Wow, 2 years old, third world country, no way essentially to save your life, and all of a sudden, let's play the lottery and let's win to actually be able to get you to the U.S. to save your life. What a
yeah.
what a crazy story. I'm sorry, I
It
had to
is.
stop you
No,
there.
no, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's actually how I start my book is with that story because it's crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, continue, please.
Right. So, but I mean, it has an indirect effect though, and I think people don't realize that, right? Because then we come back and war has engulfed the country. And so my parents have to leave everything and we go to the US, right? We immigrate. And my parents were educated, but they didn't know anything about, it's going to a new country, new system, new network, right? And it's very different than Nicaragua. Nicaragua, you get an education, your network is small with everyone you study, right? That's your network that then you can plug in for jobs and opportunities. And the US is so vast, right? And so they go in with, they have no network, the language barrier, right? So I grew up paycheck to paycheck. But because of what happened to me, I internalized it as if if I hadn't gotten sick or been an issue, they could have used that money and been a
Oh
lot
wow.
more successful in the States. So I
Wow.
felt that my purpose was to give back to them and give them stability and the life that
They
was
could have
fair,
had.
they could
Yeah,
have had.
if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't been sick, you believe that they could have
Exactly.
had this different life.
Right, but I grew up with that narrative, right? I mean,
Mm,
it's a self-created narrative. I don't think I was ever
sure.
told that narrative, right? I think I was
Yeah.
told that
Yeah.
your life
Yeah.
was saved, and I think
Mm,
it was pushed like I think their narrative was your life was saved and now you have an opportunity and we're in this country, so make the most of it and don't waste it, right? But
sure.
that mixed with
Sure.
my own internal narrative
Mm,
of seeing people struggle, I took it as then I had to become the people pleaser, perfectionist, overthinker, high achiever. And so even though but I still always believed in the giving and service. And so I saw myself, I could see people's misalignment. Like normally our pain point is what we like to solve, right? So I always felt, and maybe because I was always misaligned, right? I
mm,
could feel other people's. And so I found myself even coaching from a young age, from like middle school. I was helping, always
wow.
uplifting the elementary school kids. I would go volunteer. So even when I didn't have resources, I'm always helping the person who has
Mm,
less than myself. And I grew up that
mm,
way too, with that narrative of like, even if we're
sure.
paycheck to paycheck, remember the people who were left behind, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
that led into a life though of sacrifice, which is why you need a balance, because then
Mm,
what happens, right? Anytime when I was 16, I hit like a roadblock because it was the first time I had experienced like a romantic breakup. And yeah, it's silly, but it led me into wanting to take my own life because not because of the breakup, but because all of a sudden I had to be emotional, not put together. I was frazzled and I felt like a burden. Right.
Yeah,
And so
because now it was
oh,
more about yourself versus
exactly.
you the whole
Others.
life were making it always about everybody else.
Exactly. And fixing everyone else. And I didn't like everyone trying to help because I was like, oh, great, that's me being a burden again. And so I followed a whole life of chasing the American dream to be a
Wow.
non-burden while giving service to others. And even though I was in a career of impact, I reached a point, like, like your body tells you first, where I was like what I saw in everyone else was coming to me, right? Like I was feeling suffocated. I was, even though I was fit, I was sick. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was things that weren't matching with
Mm.
anything. And it was because I was like, this is not where I belong. Like my purpose is to do this globally, is to change the cultural shift, right? Because I was working in places that people didn't know their value, so I could do it on my team, and I'm like, but this is not enough. This is a global phenomenon. And when I'm working in countries, like, and I was able to change a lot of the frameworks that they were using there and raise $100 million, all this stuff. But when I would ask people, what is your resistance? Even in humanitarian aid, they were like, well, no one's ever listened to me. And so I don't know how to listen to others. And I was like, oh, like, this is when I knew like
Wow.
I needed to do this. But to give myself that permission that
Mm.
that it was okay for me to do it, and to not have to be there for everyone, and be vulnerable and be authentic. That's why the writing the
Sure.
book was the
Sure.
hardest thing I did,
Sure.
because I shared my story. It was a process. Yeah.
So, man, it's interesting. The giving yourself this permission piece, right? Of course, most of our audience are entrepreneurs, whether they're just
Yeah.
entrepreneurial minded and they want to get there, they currently are. Giving yourself permission is a huge problem for a lot of people, right? I had a
Yes.
past guest recently. We talked about that. She said that money, she believes, is the biggest issue. Why people don't jump is because they're scared to leave what they're currently doing, right? So she suggested saving up money, and then you feel safer to move. What do you think it takes, or how could you answer the question of somebody that's asking you, I feel like I don't have permission. I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be doing this now. Well, give me
Well,
permission.
I think that's great that you brought up the example, because it's all related. Like you were saying, like that example in the money, right? And I definitely experienced that, even though I had, because I had a great salary, all those wonderful things. That we say that, that's what society, right? And the golden handcuffs.
Sure, sure.
But the thing is that fear of losing everything you've built. But that fear of losing everything you've built, and that's why I think they're all related, right? And that whole thing of like not giving yourself permission, and the feeling guilty, and the feeling selfish, right? All of these natural feelings that everyone's going through in these transitions. I think is it can happen as an entrepreneur too, because you can have a business that you create that's not in alignment with you, because you're good at something. But then there's a business you want to create, or a direction you want to pivot to, and you also experience that same thing there, a different pivot you want to take, but you've already built something, right? So that building
Yeah, yeah.
something could be a business, could be a team, could be a pension job. It could be
What
even
you're
your
known for,
family.
even.
It could be
Yeah.
even your family, and you want to get divorced, or you want to do something different with
There
your
you go.
marriage. It's any
Mm,
context.
mm,
But the thing is that I have found that it all relates to that value proposition, because that fear comes from scarcity mindset, that
all right.
I cannot be limitless. I'm a fixed person, good at X, Y, and Z things. And the truth is, it's not true. And that's why I'm so passionate about the how to part, because I think it's first opening that person's mind that their how to they've had in their whole life, and they've done it in 100, 200 settings. And that whole how to, all that changes is that you're bringing it and communicating it in a new space. That's all that is. And you've already done that before. You've done that. And maybe sometimes in the past, it's been transitions that have been given to you, right? Either you've moved from childhood to adolescence, or you move schools, or you move jobs. But in this case, you have to initiate that pivot. But it's the same as the past. So I think it's like, that's why for me, it all comes down to, because once you have that confidence of this is my how to, and it is a superpower, that's when you realize I am limitless and I can take this anywhere. Now, it may not be tomorrow, right? There are things that
Sure.
everyone is different, and everyone has overcome things that are different. It may be a month, it may be 6 months, it may be a year. But I think for people to even start those baby steps, they need to feel that confidence that, one, they're not going to lose everything they've built, or this is going to be great, and it is something to try, because it is going to be in alignment with you. It is something you
Mm,
do already know, right? Everything you're adding on to that, maybe is little technical things. Like even when I started my own business, I was like, oh my God, I know nothing about social media because I was a public figure. So I had no presence online. I couldn't, right? I represent an organization. And so to go from diplomat to entrepreneur, it's a huge change because I went from my life being hyper scrutinized on every single word I said to now being free, but I don't even know how to use the platforms.
Yeah.
But my how to is, do I know how to help people unpack that how to make it happen, keep it going? Yes, this is just a different context. So how do I build that? What is my superpower? Okay, I'm just going to start doing it with people for free at first and move up, right? So you just lean on to, how have I always done it? Okay, I'm going to do it. And then all those little things like learning how to make reels and the platforms, I'll learn it along the way, right? But you need that
Yeah.
confidence. And what can I do in the meantime, or how much money to save, right? Those are like the more, for me, those are secondary, right? Like it's still equally important, but it's the second step, right? Once I know and I have that confidence and value, then you build out that plan that includes all those pain points of things you've overcome in the past and that resilience, right? To keep it going and at the timeline that makes sense for you. But
Yeah.
I think
Makes
that's the key to make that leap.
that key to make that leap. So much of it, man, boils down to that confidence in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
your value. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I like the even it comes from your value proposition of
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Of yourself.
I'm I'm mostly a marketing background. Like I said, we have lots of entrepreneurs, so a lot of them understand what a unique value proposition is when you think
Yeah.
of your business, your organization, and to think about for yourself, define. You know what? Let me think. What is my unique value proposition? That's going to increase this confidence in yourself and help you to take that leap, right?
Yeah.
Esther, tell us a little bit about the story of when you actually made the leap. I know you touched on it here a little bit, but in our pre-show interview, even you told me that it wasn't even really a voice in your head. It was almost like a little bit of a feeling. But just briefly, what were you doing? Because for a lot of people, I think that seems like fulfillment of what you were doing.
Yeah.
To what made you jump?
Yeah, I mean, I was a diplomat, and I had already like served in 3 different countries. I had built a team from the bottom up. I think I mentioned I raised 100 million. I changed the approach of doing things where we listen first rather than coming with our solutions. So I felt at that point like these were my options. I continue. It wasn't going to be in alignment with me because after that, after you do all that, what would have been my next step? Either I do it over again in another country, or I don't, or it stays in the organization. And that's for me, like the legacy piece is so huge. Because when I wrote down my legacy, it was beyond the organization, right? It was a need for a cultural shift. And especially in that organization, it gave me that spread to go, go talk to lots of people of different sectors and different things. And I saw this as a global problem. And I also saw that I was really frustrated. Like, I'm Latina, but it frustrates me that you go to Thanksgiving and Christmas parties, all these things, and everywhere I went, no one asked people, what is your highest aspiration? People ask, did
Mhm.
you gain weight? All the American dream check marks. And I was like, people are more than that, right? And I was getting frustrated. Like I had my best friend pass away from an aneurysm that same year. And I go to her funeral and she was around my age. And no one is talking about her, how to an impact. It was very like, oh, about their own death and
Sure,
what this
sure.
means for them. And that's why I was like, I'm here for a higher thing. So I am, even though a huge planner, and like I said, I map things out for myself. I just said I cannot continue this past December 31st. And even life tested me because even at the end, it's bureaucracy. They found some
Yeah.
regulation to say if I got out, I had to pay like $14,000 to leave. So even like leaving, I still had to pay my way out
Wow.
because I had been in or I get it. There was a pool to keep me there. And most people may have caved. May have been like, no, that's too
Mm,
much money. And you stay, but I bet on myself and I said, no, I'm going to pay this. I had no idea what I was going to do. But I was like, okay, do I have enough? Like, and I have 2 kids. I was like, do we have enough money to live for, X
mm,
amount of
mm.
time? And I'm going to create this. I got to at least try. And that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
for me, it was like, I cannot die without this trying. And when I would write, one of the first exercises in my workbook is like, write your obituary and then rewrite it. The uncomfortable piece I had was that I hadn't tried this global movement. And for me, I was like, I won't have that peace. And you don't know when mortality's, and all that stuff. And I felt that. And when I remember talking to my dad, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And he was like, I don't understand. You've impacted thousands. You have a great career in life and the children. And I remember the first time being like, that is not my legacy. It's not. And my how to expands this. This feels, I know it looks big to you, but it feels small to me. And I have to listen to that voice, and then nobody understood me around me. But that's what's great about the digital world, like I was like, well, my community around me is not ready. Doesn't mean they're not ready later, but they're not ready right now. So how do I find and tap into communities that are there already? And so I joined a women's entrepreneur group on the other side of the world in Australia. Like I read that Australia, people are a lot more into this growth mindset thing. So I said, okay. And I met these incredible women already in that journey. And then I tapped into another community on the other side of the world. And then eventually then I created community, where I'm at, but it took them still like two years, right? It takes time. Sometimes people are not there yet. They might come later. And that's how I did that. I first was like, how do I find a support group that's not my inner circle or my family, because they don't understand right now what I'm doing and they don't have to, but I need to have champions by my side, at least during this part, and then to give room to them.
Unbelievable. Actually, you don't realize how much I relate to a lot of these things that you're talking about. Also, I mean, I love that you brought this piece about community, because that's what I'm solely focused on right now, is helping people to come together, to push each other forward, make that jump, because the people in your circle right now might not be ready, able to push you forward. Other people in the world are. But man, the pieces I just want to highlight here is that you talked about at the holiday party. You realize these conversations that people are having are like so, I don't want to use the word shallow, but just like day to day, mundane. They're not talking about bigger. And then even you said mortality came to life, a friend that had passed away, and people aren't talking about, wow, like she made this huge impact, right? It's just, they're almost thinking more about themselves. Oh, how are you feeling about this, right? And that led you to actually realize. And this exercise about writing your own obituary, amazing. Everybody go, it'll be linked in the show notes. Go check out Esther's book, the workbook also. Esther, we're running out of time quickly. Talk to us just a little bit about BeActChange. I would hate myself if I didn't give you a chance to talk about it.
Sure. Yeah, and the book and workbook are on Kindle for 99 cents, because I feel that maybe it'll reach the teenager in me back
Amazing.
then, so
Love that.
I'm all about access. But BeActChange, yeah, so that's my business. I told you, I think business, I think I mentioned maybe in the pre-call, business is not a great word for me. I like to think about it
No.
as global movement. I do a lot of pro bono work too. But BeActChange is be your authentic self, whatever that is. And, act, take action, and we can together change the world. So that's where that name comes. And I never liked my business to be my name, even on Instagram, because I see as collective power. Like my thing is, I'm tired of doing things alone. I don't want to do things alone anymore. And I believe all of our how-tos need to come together. And as trailblazers, when we actually all come together, we can create collective power and change the world. So my vision in the future, right now, it's like BeActChange is me and my husband, but I envision more people coming in, and we're creating this movement together. And so that's the name behind it. And yeah, and the workbook's actually been a bigger hit than the book, because it has all that practical exercise. It's my full coaching program on paper, because it's about, I want you to be able to unpack this, whether you work with me or not.
Amazing. So, you're giving so much service to the world, which is unbelievable. And I totally agree that the more you give, the more you get. Along those lines, of course, journey to legacy. One of the last questions I like to ask everybody is, what does legacy mean to you? And what is the legacy that you want to leave on this world?
Yeah. So legacy for me is like that feeling and impact you want to leave in the world. I mean, and that's why I start that exercise with the obituary. Because when you actually write your obituary, the things that you're writing in there, it's about how you've made people feel and the impact you created when you really have like a celebration of life ceremony, right? It's not about the metrics. You never go in there and like that person made X amount of money and drove X car and had this house, right? It's not about that, right? It's about the feeling, the impact, and who you were with. So even when I do like visualization exercise, like where you want to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years in legacy, I tell people, I don't want to know about if you have a business, how much income you made or your team grew, like how are you feeling and who are you with and the impact you've made? Because that is what we want, right? And so that's how I start that exercise to get people in that framework, right? And it's not that I'm against metrics and goals, but the metrics and goals should follow from the feeling and impact rather than do metric and goals and then do the feeling, right? Because that's when we clash, right? But if you start from feeling and impact, the goals and the metrics and the accolades will slowly develop from there, but will be aligned to what you want to create. Like even when I didn't know I was going to leave my job or not, I wrote down a notebook. I wanted freedom, impact at a larger scale. And I could say that in 5 years, that's what I did. Right. But it was about a feeling, right? An impact. And I'm like, that's what I created. Could I have imagined what BeActChange has become or that? No. But I followed that feeling and impact I wanted to create, and everything else has kind of come along with that and all the accolades that come with that. So legacy for me though, it's that, but it's imagine if we all come together, right? Like the way I see it is we all have these legacies we want to create, right? We all have this feeling impact. For me, like that, my legacy is to have impact at a global scale, bring in trailblazers together for collective power. Because I really believe that if we all are living, right, our true purpose, our legacy in alignment, all those horrible things we see in the world would end. Terrorism, anxiety, depression, right? Because we wouldn't just be joining groups just to join groups, right? We wouldn't be just we wouldn't be feeling those feelings because we're showing up how we want to show up authentically. We're not being suppressed. We're not being oppressed. We're being authentic. So for me, it's all roots in that. So if we can all live and like do that global cultural shift where we're all asking people's highest aspirations, supporting each other, being able to trailblaze, because I believe all of us have that trailblazer within, right? Do what our 7-year-old self wanted to do. Have that opportunity, do it. We can change the world, and we'd be more willing to do it together. Like, I'm tired of working alone. That's why I think I mentioned BeActChange for me is a collective. I envision that my legacy is not just mine, but it's a shared one.
And that's a wrap. Everybody, thank you so much for being here today, for listening in. Wow, I hope you got as much value as I did. That interview just got better and better. Actually, after we cut it, Esther and I talked for another hour. It's unbelievable, all this alignment. One thing I want to shout out to you all listening today, Esther is busy accepting applications for a limitless retreat. It's called Own Your Power and Intuition. So if you related to some of the stuff she was talking about today, please check it out. It's the show notes down below will be the link, like I said, to the limitless retreat. Own Your Power and Intuition. Esther's really doing amazing things. I personally have already purchased the book and the workbook. Unbelievable alignment. Everybody, thank you again for being here today. And as always, please go check out the Journey to Legacy community. It is where literally you can get access to Esther, to more people like her, the community of like-minded individuals coming together to help lift each other up, grow personally, and help to change the world. That's the legacy that we're all working together to leave. Come and join us. We're at journeytolegacy.org. Thank you again. Until next time, my name is Wayne Veldsman. You've been listening to the Journey to Legacy podcast. Cheers.